Good morning. This is the Thursday routine weekly briefing for Central North Carolina, effective through next Wednesday, November 8th. It was a chilly start this morning. We had a freeze warning in effect for all of Central North Carolina, and we had low temperatures pretty much at or below freezing throughout the region. Including some lower 20s. We had 21 degrees at Siler City, Southern Pines, Roxborough, and even a report out of Cary in Wake County. But for the most part, temperatures were in the mid to upper 20s to around 30 degrees in the coastal plain. And with those low temperatures, that has now effectively ended the growing season. And what that means is the office here in Raleigh will no longer be issuing frost and freeze products until next spring. It's expected that temperatures are going to be cold and below freezing at times through the winter months, of course. And many of our neighboring offices have also ended their frost freeze programs until next spring as well, with the exception of some coastal locations in North Carolina. The reason we've had the cold temperatures is there's been an area of Arctic high pressure that's built out of the Northwest Territories and the Arctic down across much of Canada and the central and now eastern United States, and it's become centered pretty much directly over the eastern U.S. This morning. And that area of high pressure is going to generally remain over the eastern U.S. while modifying or weakening with associated moderating temperatures through at least the early part of next week. So our forecast for Central North Carolina is one that will be dominated by that high pressure that extends over much of the eastern U.S. and particularly the southeastern United States, with again moderating temperatures. We will have freezing conditions again tonight, but otherwise temperatures will moderate and lows will be trending through the 30s and 40s. And even some 50s possible by the time we get into next week. And those are low temperatures, and high temperatures will be trending upward as well and above seasonable averages, with temperatures reaching the 60s and even 70s by the weekend and the early part of next week. And it looks like a mainly dry forecast. There is a cold front that will approach from the northwest with time, and it may settle into the Carolinas by the mid to latter part of next week, but it looks like precipitation chances with that will be relatively limited, and amounts as well. And until we see greater consistency in the models, we're not even sure exactly when that front will get here. But the latest forecast in this map here for Wednesday in the bottom right graphic there has it over South Carolina and Georgia, but some of the latest indications are it may still be north of our region by the time we get into Wednesday, and it may not make a run for the Carolinas until later in the week. With that dry forecast, this is the forecast precipitation from the Weather Prediction Center, and you can see that there's no rain expected in pretty much all of North Carolina, with the exception along the immediate coast, where a weak coastal front may develop and provide a small chance of showers right along the immediate coast later this weekend into the early and mid part of next week. But for the most part, dry for most folks. With that dry forecast, there is no threat of thunderstorms, certainly not severe ones, and no risk of excessive rain. The tropics are also relatively quiet, at least for any threat to the Carolinas. There is a broad area of low pressure over the central and western Caribbean Sea that's drifting westward. It will be moving inland over Central America on Saturday, but only a very limited 20% chance of any development with that system, as it does move west toward the Central American coast through the early part of this weekend. With the dry conditions forecast and the ones that have occurred for the last several weeks and months, drought is becoming an increasing concern. And in fact, the latest drought monitor update has expanded the abnormally dry conditions to encompass almost the entirety of North Carolina, with the exception of a small part of the coastal plain there, and an eastward expansion of the moderate drought conditions, now including most of the southern and western Piedmont and a good chunk of the Sandhills as well. and severe drought has been introduced over a larger area over the southern mountains and the southern foothills, whereas last week it was a much smaller area of the southern mountains. So things are certainly drying out, and that dryness is becoming an increasing concern with the drought conditions, and that is increasing the risk of some wildfire activity, particularly with the wind and low relative humidity that we had yesterday. It looks like there are a few fires burning across the state this morning that we can see in satellite imagery. And with that leaf litter that will be falling in the coming weeks, that too will provide some fuels for additional wildfire threat, unless we get some wetting rain to alleviate that concern. Looking ahead from the Climate Prediction Center, the 8 to 14 day or the 2-week outlook for temperatures and precipitation chances. Looks like average temperatures generally expected for the Carolinas, and hopefully trend toward slightly above average precipitation chances, especially along the coastal part of the Carolinas and the Middle Atlantic. So in summary, we've got that area of high pressure that will continue to extend across North Carolina pretty much for the entire forecast period while weakening, and with associated moderating temperatures and continued mainly dry conditions, at least through the early part of next week. And then any chance of rain we do have will be delayed until the mid to latter part of next week. And there are no hazards or impacts associated with that. Again, we will have the freezing temperatures tonight, but given that we have now ended the growing season and discontinued use of the frost and freeze products, that will not be highlighted in any of those products or the hazardous weather outlook, for example. And that's all we have for you. Hope you all have a wonderful weekend.